All right. 6:31 p.m. on Monday, January 4th. I will call the Board of Selectmen meeting to order. Happy New Year, everybody. Let's hope this one is better in as many respects as possible than the last one. All right, so this meeting is being recorded. Minutes are being taken by Gail Hunter. Anybody else is recording the meetings asked to notify the chair at this time. On a regular agenda item 0, if anybody has a comment for anything that's not on the agenda tonight, I'll give you a few minutes to do so now. Just unmute yourself, identify yourself, and be recognized. All right. I hear nothing on that item, so we'll move on to item number 1, which is a public tree hearing, possible removal of 4 trees, 24-inch Norway maple on Mascanoma Park, an 8-inch hybrid elm in Reed Park, a 30-inch eastern white pine on Jersey Lane, and an 18-inch Norway maple on Lincoln Street near the Lincoln Street well near the bridge. Can I get a motion to open the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Roll call vote. Ms. Jakes,
Aye.
Mr. Round,
Aye.
Ms. Harrison,
Aye.
Mr. Bodmer Turner,
Aye.
Mr. Bowling votes yes. All right, so there's 3 trees here that have been recommended for removal by the town's tree warden, Tom Henderson, who's on the call tonight. And also one that's been asked to be removed by the Department of Public Works. And I think let's take that one first. That is an 18-inch Norway maple on the near the Lincoln Street well. Who is going to be speaking on that one? Is that going to be Chuck, Nathan, or Tom Henderson? Or Greg?
So I was thinking that Chuck would be with us. He was going to speak to that, but I can if need be.
Well, maybe he's going to come along in a little bit, so maybe I'll.
Sure. So this is an 18-inch Norway.
This
That's
is Chuck if you want. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Sorry about that.
Yep, go ahead.
Yep, so the 18-inch Norway maple is by the well, by the pedestrian bridge crossing over. We've actually undertaken kind of a little bit of a side project where we're basically doing one of those, I'm blanking on the technical term, but basically making a meadow of grass, and the tree canopy will negatively impact that. So that was one of the reasoning for asking to remove it. Also, it's pretty much in line with the overhead electric that goes into the well. So that was another consideration, and I think it's also pretty close proximity to the pedestrian bridge, and it's so for all those reasons, we thought it'd be better just to take it down as soon as we decided we were going to undertake the project. So that was for.
yeah. I think Chuck was trying to remember the pollinator garden project.
Thank you. Yes.
Is this the Gina Beinecke that she got going?
Yes, exactly.
Thank you.
Okay. So can I get any questions from board members on this? And then we'll open it up and ask members of the public if they have opinions.
Am I trying to do it, taking a tree down so that we can put a meadow in? That doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
That's not exactly it. Like I said, the tree is actually in close proximity to the overhead wire lines. But the other thing, the reason it came to my attention was because we did clear that area, and we're putting in one of these pollinator plots. And the pollinator plots themselves, because of the tree canopy of the tree, as well as the root system, pretty much stop the growth of the pollinator plot or impede it. So it's, and it's from a perspective of, CO2 and greenhouse gases and, all those types of things. That's one of the reasons why you are looking to do a pollinator plot. So it seems to be kind of a neutral impact, I guess, in what we normally think of when we take trees down.
What's a pollinator plot? Is that like a field of wildflowers? Is that what that is?
Yep.
All right. I mean,
Essentially,
in essence, okay. I'm looking at the picture here. I do not see the tree impeding the wires. I took a look. Yeah, it might in a few years, but it's next to the wires. But the pollinator plot, I did not know that was part of the picture. And that's initiative by one of the staff members at the high school, or?
No,
no, it was actually just a town resident.
A town
that
resident? Oh,
has done one, and then she actually went in front of the Concom already, looking for town land that could be used to do one of these things. And then, so we went around and looked at several different areas, and I thought this was one of the ones that I could promote as, from a DPW perspective that we could do. And it is supposed to be educational, so I know she will be making up signage and talking to people at the school about promoting it. And essentially, it's the pollinator plot aspect of it is to remove turf grass and replant these types of pollinator plots. So the tree was just kind of a side issue that we were looking to deal with.
Eli, if I may, I have
Go ahead, Becky.
Chuck, I was over looking at it as well, and while I didn't quite see how that specific tree was directly in line with power lines, I did see what I think is maybe a paper bark maple it's small, but it's growing up and it is directly underneath power lines. Is that tree going to be taken out or asked to be removed as well if this if the pollinator field goes in?
Yeah, so I think I will be back for that one as well, but it didn't make it onto this hearing. But yeah, that one is on my radar as well.
If you go, I went down to the site as well, and if you stand right at the driveway on the sidewalk and you look back towards the golf course, there are probably 15 small trees that are growing right into the wires, that are right up next to the wires. Neither the tree that you're talking about, nor the one that Becky referred to, which I also observed, is an imminent threat to those wires. But these trees going all the way down along the sidewalk are. And I'm wondering if we're talking about something that could have been accomplished with pruning. I still am a little bit thrown off by taking out trees to put in a meadow. That seems like going backwards. And I don't mean to be, a hugger here, but it just seems like the wrong direction to be going in.
Eli, may I make a comment?
Yeah, and then I'm gonna open it up for public, I think.
Okay, I agree with Jeff, and I applaud Chuck for trying to help with this effort.
Yeah.
In this department, in that area, I just worry about, do trucks go over that? And it's not a large patch of grass, but it's a patch nonetheless. And do trucks end up driving over that? I just wonder if there's perhaps not a better area, or perhaps a more suitable one that we could find, even perhaps a patch that is some of the town-owned land that the school uses. I just hate to take even though it is a Norway maple, I just am reluctant to take an 18-inch tree down that's not causing any immediate danger.
If I may, Eli, I got a question for Chuck. Chuck, how big is this wildflower garden, pollinator garden? Is that going to be that whole quadrant that goes along the left side of the driveway to where the turnaround area is in the pumping station?
Yes, it will be, and it goes around the backside as well. So there's
Okay. I mean, there's a lot
it's
of.
it's approaching a quarter of an acre. It's not a small area.
No, and
Oh, wow.
it's all quite open on the left side of the driveway, that whole run. I mean, there's this tree and then there's not too much going up that whole driveway. So that's all
Yep.
part of this. I understand
Yep.
what's going on. Well, this tree is in kind of one little corner of that whole plot, and I am kind of in accordance with Jeff and Becky that taking that tree out is not going to add a whole lot of square footage to the overall space there. It's kind of at the corner, right at the beginning.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna be offended if the tree doesn't come down. I'm just in the middle.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to open this up to members of the public who wish to comment on this. So anybody wants to comment, just unmute yourself, identify yourself, and be recognized.
Good evening, it's Sue Mittermeier, 38 C Street.
Hi, Sue, go ahead.
Hi, thank you so much. I had a look at the tree as well, and I like what Becky and John and Jeffrey have said. It feels like it's off in a corner. I totally applaud the idea of pollinator gardens. I want to promote bees as well, but I just feel like it's unnecessary to take this one down at this time.
Any other comments from the public? Okay, the way we're going to do this is we're going to hear the evidence on all of these, the evidence and public comment on all of these trees, and then we're going to close the evidentiary portion of the public hearing and then vote on all 4 trees. So we're going to come back to the vote on this one shortly. So on the remaining trees, let's start off with the 24-inch Norway maple in Masconoma Park. And for Jeff, were you about to say something?
I have one last comment on this tree.
Yeah.
Which is not about this tree, but the other one that Chuck mentioned, which is directly under the power line and looks like it was a volunteer. I would certainly entertain a proposal to remove that tree, which will have a very attenuated life if it's pruned around those power lines. So I think that that would be something that would be more in line with what I could support.
Okay, moving on to the 24-inch Norway maple in Masconoma Park. Tom Henderson, comments on that, please?
Yeah, this is a large Norway maple, probably planted in the early stages of the park. It's in severe decline. It has a lot of broken, rotten limbs hung up in it, and it was, we were going to try to prune it, but it's continued its onward decline, and it's probably about 60% dead. It's a tree I certainly think is in a key position in town, but I think we would benefit well by planting some new trees here and removing it at this time because of its state of health.
Board members.
I have no questions on this one or comments.
Yeah. One question, Tom.
Sure.
This tree would be taken down and would be replaced with something else with, in some reasonable time?
I think we could, certainly get it, we could ask Sue, probably she'd know better with the Friends of the Trees. I'm sure they would like to plant some more trees here because there is an ongoing project of planting there.
Okay. I agree, it's a sick tree.
Members of the
Also a
public,
dangerous tree.
members of the public with comments on this tree, 24-inch Norway maple in Masconama Park. All right, let's move on to the 8-inch hybrid elm in Reed Park. Tom Henderson.
Yeah, it's a tree that's continued to sulk in that area. Some places these elms do well. This one's been in probably for 25 years and it still seems to be not growing. It's 50% dead right now. It has 2 major leaders on it. One of them is dead right now, and it's in a location. I don't know if it doesn't like the saltwater infiltration through the riprap there or whatever it is. It just doesn't seem to be doing well, not growing at all, hasn't really grown at all for the last 10 years. And I think here again, we could benefit by maybe replacing it with another nice shade tree in the area.
Board members?
Tom, go ahead, Becky.
I was just going to say, it looks pretty besieged. And I also wonder if that's really, if you really want a tree that is right in the riprap like that. So I don't have any problems with this one.
Jeff?
Tom, could you comment on the health of the crab apples that run all along the riffraff wall and seem to be in pretty good shape to my untutored eye?
Yeah, they've done better. I think they got a pruning. They've done better. The crabs tend to get defoliated very early by the worms, and I think that's part of a problem down there. They were defoliated repeatedly for about 5 or 6 or 7 years, and they're struggling. And but with a little care and pruning, maybe a little feeding, they could be made to improve. They are subject to injury there occasionally, and I don't like to call it vandalism, but branches broken off occasionally by transient traffic through the area, down to the railroad crossing, over to the parking lots, et cetera, as are a lot of small trees. The small trees seem to suffer most from that, and we're noticing quite a bit of that. But we do the best we can to make the public aware of, to not be allowed the children to climb up into them, play in them. I mean, we all climbed in trees as kids and things happen, but I would say in general, those crabs are doing better after their pruning.
Other board members? Members of the public, any comments on the 8-inch hybrid elm in Reed Park that's proposed to be removed?
So you'll be unsurprised to hear from me again, Sue Mittermeier, 38 C Street, involved with Friends of Manchester Trees, just a little bit. So for both of those trees, we would be happy to, if they do come down, to follow up with any plantings that would be appropriate in Reed Park and Masconomo. We did do replants in the Masconomo area where that large tree is probably coming down. So yeah, we're happy to sweep up and do some plantings there afterwards.
Okay, thank you. Other members of the public? All right, let's move on to the 30-inch Eastern White Pine on Jersey Lane. Tom Henderson.
Yeah, it's a very tall tree, maybe over 100 feet, 110 feet tall. It is the only evergreen along that strip. For all that I can determine, looking at it up as high as I can see, it appears to be very healthy, no no visible trunk or root collar injuries, and I certainly would be against removing that tree. It adds a little of the native aspect to the area, and certainly it's like a big sentinel evergreen on that side of the Winthrop Field area.
Now, this one was being requested to be removed by the Winthrop Field Committee. Mike Chapman, are you here to speak on behalf of that?
Yes, Eli. Mike Chapman, 131 Bridge Street, Chairman of the Winthrop Field Committee. That tree was not requested to be removed by the Winthrop Field Committee. We did ask the town to come down and take a look at the trees along the border of Winthrop Field, right along Jersey Lane, because there were several dead and dying trees there that have been dropping branches on Winthrop Field, on Jersey Lane, sorry. So we really have no position on that tree, on the white pine tree. The only concern would be, as we keep an eye on it, if it were to fall, what it might take with it. Power lines, telephone lines on the other side of the street. But yeah, that's not a tree that the Winthrop Field Committee asked to be removed.
Yeah,
Eli,
I
this
see
is
the reason.
Chuck. Can you hear me?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I can hear you, Chuck. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, so what Mike and Tom have said, I understand. We did have our tree company, Sequoia, they have an arborist on, the payroll that went down and looked at all those trees, like Mike said, when they asked about other dead ones being removed. And this was something that he brought up as something that we may want to look into removal for the various reasons if it were to fall and, so on and so forth. So that's how this tree got onto the warrant tonight. But again, I'll leave it up to the board.
Yeah,
And
the reason I posted it because it did have one of their removal tags on it. When I went down to look at the trees they proposed for removal, it had one of their little small orange tags on it. So I assumed somebody wanted it removed. And I brought it to the attention of the DPW, and they, as Chuck has said, they requested it be posted or for a hearing.
okay. Yeah, Eli, Mike Chapman again. Maybe we could have Jim Maroney speak to this tree. It's right across from his property on Jersey Lane.
Yes, thanks,
Go ahead,
Mike.
Jim.
Yeah, while I have no desire to want to take down any of the trees, and as a member of the Winthrop Field Committee with Mike, I'm obviously witness to, over the last 5 years, major limbs having come down in the street, and major trees, one just on our property, actually it was on the town property, but it came down on ours, similar pine a couple years ago. So these storms, and that was significantly damaged as well, unhealthy. Again, I have, my concern is that tree, if you look at it, my eye, and again, I'm not an expert at all, it looks to be half dead. And again, I'm just viewing it as a safety issue because I'm going to say at least 5 major limbs have come down, or leaders off of trees along Jersey Lane, just because there hasn't been the proper pruning along Winthrop Field. Again, it's the committee's decision, but it would be a tragedy if that came down and somebody was coming by. And again, I think somebody else should examine it, but I'm going to say half of it appears to be dead to me on the Jersey Lane side. But again, somebody else should make that determination. But again, I raised it strictly, all the trees along Jersey Lane, as a safety issue for all the dead, which has, a lot of it has been addressed and taken out. But.
Board members, go ahead, Jeff. Jeff, go ahead.
There are 2 trees that were in that same area, about 20 feet back towards 127. that were recently removed. The stumps were still showing shavings on them, and they were still blonde. They hadn't started to age or weather at all. And the core of those two trees, now those trees are pretty big. They were probably about 18 to 20 inches in diameter, and they appeared, Tom, to be evergreens. They appeared to be like a cedar tree or something like that. The core of those trees, I put my hand right down into them, was rotten and soft on both of them. And they literally appear to have been taken down in the last month and a half. I'd like to understand how those trees were taken down, number one, and whether there is a concern about the core of this granddaddy that we're talking about, because that would create a lot of problems. And I understand the concerns about it falling on people's property. It looks very solid from the outside, but Tom, you have a better way of estimating what those cores would look like than I do. So I have two questions. One is, how did those other two trees come down? They were clearly cut. And is there a concern about internal damage on this tree that's hidden?
Yeah, I went over, those trees were tagged. I believe there were 3 locust trees, 1 Norway maple tree, and another tree that was so badly dead and gone that I really couldn't determine its species. And I gave them the okay as far as I was concerned, as they being an issue with public safety. With regard to the white pine, it's very difficult to determine. Locust trees have a tendency to rot from the inside. Sometimes it isn't visible. The heartwood, which is the strengthening portion of the trunk of the tree, has a tendency to rot quite extensively, and you can't really see that. In the case of those trees, there were visible scars and cavities on them. As I said, when I examined the white pine, I could find no visible indicators that the tree represented an imminent threat to the safety of the public, and therefore I requested, if it was requested to be removed, that it be held for a public hearing, which we're doing tonight.
Has that tree been pruned at all, Tom?
The white pine?
Yep.
I don't believe so. I mean, that whole lane going all up through there is a lot of white pines and large oak trees. I agree with you. It leads a lot of attention, as do a lot of our woodland streets. That's where it seems to be, we don't have the resources to get in there and take care of all these areas. We have enough trouble trying to maintain what we have downtown, but white pines, it's very common for them when they get heavy with snow in the winter to bend and snap. It's very common for them to drop limbs. I think now we can watch a tree and take a look at it in the spring. It's really hard to tell looking up at the tree. It's so crowded by other trees, the real health of the tree till it starts to, green up and grow again in the spring. All the white pines around in the area appear to be suffering some, premature needle cast, browning of the needles. That doesn't necessarily mean those branches are dead. It's related to drought and wind and stress, and it's an old tree, but like I say, it's sort of one of the nicer ones that we have on that side. And when you live in that type of area, surrounded by native woodland, there's always going to be issues with the trees, even out in those areas. It's just a common practice in the forest for trees to drop limbs, to sustain injuries, and they're trees normally that no city or town has the resources to maintain in those type of areas.
Eli, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead, Becky.
Tom, I agree with what you've said, and certainly appreciate your expertise. And I am reluctant for us to start removing trees that are seemingly healthy simply because we are worried about a possible risk. And I think if that's the case, if we start doing that, we could have essentially take down just about any tree. But what I wanted to ask Tom was, I too noticed when I was over there that trees had been cut, and it looked to me more like perhaps a dozen on that one sort of straight run of Jersey before it makes the first turn heading up towards the Clara B. Winthrop Reserve. Anyway, it looked as if maybe 6 trees had been taken out, and some of them did not look as if the cores were unhealthy. But I didn't take a super close look as Jeff did. How many were taken out, and were those all recently taken out for the same reason? Of safety issues?
I think about 10 or 15 years ago, we had another project over there where we removed some trees. And originally what they wanted to do was take down all of the trees on that side of the road. And of course, you're involved in a wetlands area at the beginning of the road, and many of the trees were nice trees. And we were able to save about, I want to say, maybe 85% of what the neighborhood wanted removed there. And the trees that were left behind, which is often the result of what this does, is they are thriving and doing very well because they're getting more sunlight. And what we did allow them to take out at that time were trees that were badly injured or diseased. And it's like you can't necessarily look at the basal cut, the flush cut on the stump. There were other issues with those trees higher up where they could possibly snap off 10 feet off the ground, where there were cavities and visible scars. And I did spend quite a bit of time looking at the trees, and I would estimate, I didn't take an exact count, but I think in this large project, I think you're right on there with about 5 or 6 trees were removed in this large project. But they were all trees, to my best ability to determine, that constituted I wouldn't say extreme hazard, but a very potential and possible hazard. And where the neighbors had concern, we try to reach a happy medium to keep people who use the road, walk the road, drive up the road, depend on the utilities. My philosophy is it's a good idea sometimes to remove some trees in a native growth, and they call this forest thinning, and state foresters will come in and look at your land and town land and suggest what will benefit and won't be benefit. And the trees that remain always do benefit from the trees, the sick trees and unhealthy trees that are removed.
Good. Thank you very much, Tom.
Tom, I've got a question. Is a tree that is the height of that pine tree, you said over 100 feet. Yeah, you had to look up a long way to get to the top. Is that something that can be trimmed or pruned, given the fact that maybe there are some limbs coming off of that? And I understand that can happen.
Yeah, the only solution where that has a long straight, all your viable growth is up there at the top, and you really wouldn't want to take any more of that off. The tree grew that way because its lower limbs got shaded out, and they drop off and they fall off, and you see them all through the forest. I mean, we have an area up called the Cathedral of Pines. It has many large, massive white pines like that up in the area where they want to put that development on Upper School Street. And this is one of the existing trees of that era and that time. It's probably 100, 150 years old. It could be.
All right. So you're saying it's not practical to trim the limbs on a tree like that, or?
Well, it doesn't really accomplish anything.
Okay.
All you're doing is you might be creating a little less wind resistance, but obviously that tree has taken some tremendous blows. I mean, we'd have had some really strong. So that indicates to me that it's structurally, it's quite sound. Of course, you never know. I mean, there can be a flaw. Squirrels can get in, a branch break off, hollow out. It's hard to keep a close eye on a tree like that, that's tall. Like I say, we have them all through the conservation area and the woodland and the upper school and the wilderness area and up along. I mean, it's sort of a unique tree in that area because it's the only one that remains, and that sort of tells me that it's viable. You know, it bends and sways, I'm sure, but we have them like that all over that do that and survive and continue to provide what they provide.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Any other board members have questions on that tree before I turn it over to the public? All right, members of the public with comments on the 30-inch eastern white pine on Jersey Lane.
Eli, Peter Manassian, 5 Wood Home Road, member
Go ahead,
of
Peter.
and the director of Friends of Trees. I was over looking at the tree again today too, and the appearance of the tree looks to be healthy. There is a little bit of balding at the top that Tom mentioned, but that doesn't indicate that the limbs are in any way diseased. The base of the tree looks really strong. It is like a sentinel. It's got great age, and it defines part of what makes Jersey Lane special. Over the years, there's been a loss of the native locust trees along Jersey Lane, which really define the aesthetic of that lower area. That tree the appearance of that tree can certainly be benefited by pruning judiciously some of the lower, clearly broken off or dead limbs, maybe 10, 15 feet up. That would increase the appearance of the tree for anyone that's concerned about it looking a little shoddy. That could be done without in any way harming the tree. So, but the tree is part of that landscape and should be given more time. I want to pick up on what Becky said about a couple of the stumps that she noticed down closer to the opening, that sort of opening where there's a gate now that allows you to go out into the field. There was one very large stump that where the stump had no sign at all of any kind of disease or any kind of hollowing out at all. And I remember looking at that tree, and Tom, please correct me if I'm wrong. I remember looking at that tree with you several years ago. And you looked at that tree and said, beautiful, majestic tree. It had basically 3 trunks, locust tree. And you said, that center trunk doesn't look to be too healthy. You said, I think that would be something for us to do that would benefit that tree, taking that center stalk out and so the rest of the tree would remain. And what's really sad is that entire tree was taken out. And I'm a runner, and I run up Jersey Lane all the time. And I look at those trees because they're part of what make the run enjoyable. And the other 2 stalks of that tree were perfectly healthy, at least from what I can tell. And that center stalk, I'll certainly defer to Tom's expertise. But that tree, and there was another locust next to it, that was stump that had absolutely no sign of rot in the stump itself. And so I'm concerned about what's happening to Jersey Lane in a sense, and whether or not we're taking too aggressive a stance in terms of what needs to be taken out. Pruning and keeping an eye on monitoring these trees along that section, it certainly makes all the sense in the world. But we can't be living in fear of trees falling down all the time because, otherwise, why have trees? So I just wanted to offer that point of view. I'm just sad that that large locust tree was not thought about and looked at more carefully in terms of how it could have been retained based on Tom's assessment of a year or 2 ago.
Was the removal of those trees, Tom, was the removal of those other trees, was that done at the behest, or was that initiated by neighbors in that area asking for those trees to be removed?
I honestly don't know. You all know my job is just to go over at the direction of the DPW and the selectmen to evaluate the health and condition of the trees to the best of my ability. And every tree that I saw with their mark on them, that's what I did. And I know Peter's concern for the locust trees are very difficult because whenever they get an injury, they always tend to, the heartwood always tends to rot unless that injury is treated. And that can appear way up high, a third of the way up, halfway up, even at the top. And it's very, very difficult. But they do have that native type locust tree, Robinia, is its species. It's a tree that's very prone to that. And all of those trees that had the marks for removal that I looked at, all had issues with, in my opinion, I did feel that there were safety issues. To the degree of safety issue that we want to go, I mean, if you want to have hearings on every tree, we can do that. It's just, I thought, in my opinion, and I'm sure the arborist from Chicoria looked at them. He's a contemporary of mine, protege of mine, Ben Staples, and he would certainly state to that fact that the trees that were removed had very serious safety issues, but not safety issues that if they were further away from the road, we probably could live with them. But in that proximity to the telecommunications lines and things like that, and safety issues over the road, I mean, Peter did make a good point that we can't live in fear of every safety issue, and I agree wholeheartedly with him on that. Sometimes we have to live with the trees that have issues, but we can certainly in the future, if they want every tree that's requested on removal, we can sort of do away with the safety issue unless it's really an evident threat to the public, and have a hearing on everything.
Yeah,
Eli, this is Chuck. Can I comment on that? Or
Yeah, go ahead, Chuck.
do you mind if I just want to put a point on this area in general, and all of the trees, but we were approached, but not at the behest of any one person, to look at the trees on Jersey Lane, because we have had a lot of limbs and trees come down in that area. We did not just remove a whole bunch of trees for the sake of removing trees. Like I said, like Tom said and others have said, we had the Secoria arborist look at it. We had Tom look at it. We have a guy in-house at DPW that looks at it. And together, they all looked at these trees. We did several $1,000s worth of pruning on Jersey Lane, and we did several $1,000s worth of removal. And the ones that were removed were deemed that we couldn't save. So I just want to say, like, none of this was done, out of a place where we were just trying to, rush through or, anything else. It was just concerns were brought that were legitimate. We looked at them as a team like we always do. The ones that were needed to be removed were removed. Others that were more suspects are now being heard. And that's what we do with all of the trees that get removed. So I just want to make sure that's clear and everybody understands what that process was in this case.
Yeah. Eli, if I may, Mike Chapman from the Winthrop Field
Go
Committee.
ahead,
We did approach Chuck. We have 3 members of the committee who live on Jersey Lane, plus the neighbors in between 2 of the members. And there was a concern about the trees on Jersey Lane dropping branches. So we did approach Chuck, and we did ask if the DPW could do a survey of the area and do whatever they thought was the right thing to do. So I want to make it clear that the neighbors or the Winthrop Field Committee did not go through and mark or ask for specific trees to be cut out. What we did was we just took a look at the situation where Jim Maroney is chainsawing branches out of Jersey Lane and dragging them into the field. And we just asked the DPW to take a look at the situation and do what they thought was right. So that was, if you're looking for how this was initiated, it was really the Winthrop Field approached Chuck because the neighbors had approached the Winthrop Field Committee.
All right. I think we've actually, we've gone down a little bit of a side path here. I think it's worth maybe discussing our process a little bit more in the future. But I think I would like to bring us back to the 4 trees that are as a matter of the actual public hearing tonight. Is there any other comment on the 30-inch eastern white pine on Jersey Lane from members of the public?
Peter Manassi again from 5 Woodham Lane. I think it was just mentioned that someone was using a chainsaw on some of those trees. Was that a member of the town or an arborist, or was that just a private citizen that did that?
This is Jim Maroney. When the tree, 40, 50-foot leader falls on the street, I take my chainsaw out and cut it and get it off the road. That's the extent. I've never cut a branch of any tree. I'd like to see all the trees stay, but I raised the issue because of safety of the number of limbs, significant limbs that I've seen come down. If the determination by the experts was everything is okay, then it's okay. But I've witnessed and I've cut up. If you went to Winthrop Field right now, across from 6 Jersey Lane, you'll see about a 30, 40-foot leader that came down in September and across the wall and into the street. And if the person's walking by, it's going to kill them. But again, and I had raised the issue about a month or two before that for it to be investigated. So this is how it all developed, as Mike said.
And Peter Manassi, again, thank you for clarifying that. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Now that the cutting and pruning has been completed, I wondered if Chuck would go back to that 30-inch white pine and under Tom's supervision and just cut some of the dead out so that it's pruned along with the other trees that have been pruned.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's the experts to make that determination. I have no.
I was addressing everyone. I was addressing Eli or Chuck, regarding that. Now that we've done that, and that tree could benefit from pruning, and other trees along the street have been pruned, why not go back now and give that tree a little bit of aesthetics and cleaning up?
Chuck, do you have any room for pruning that tree?
Yeah, we'll have to take another look at it. I mean, we're committed to, pruning whenever we can. So, I'd have to look at specifically and have Sequoia come back out to make another assessment now that that's done. Hasn't been done yet.
Any other members of the public, any comments on this tree? Any other comments from the board members before we close the evidentiary portion of the hearing?
I think one more comment that I have, we'll keep a close watch on the white pine tree. I think it's wise in keeping it for a while, and we'll watch it as best as we can. And that's why, trees are difficult to assess. You can never give a 100% security that it isn't going to drop branches or doesn't. That's, as I tried to explain, that's what forest trees do naturally. And yes, there are incidences. There have been accidents and things, but I just think we can't be overly cautious or whatever it is. We want to be cautious, certainly, and I don't live there and go up and down the road, but I did live on Forster Road for many years up on the top, and we were like neighbors like Jim. We were out occasionally trying to drag a branch across. We just lived with that, and I lived right at the top of Forster Road, and it was always after every storm, and there would be white pine branches, and there will continue to be, and we can't go in there and prune and say that you won't see another branch down in the middle of Jersey Lane at some point. That's just, it's a little narrow road with trees that form a natural arch from both sides over. And that's what it is. And, I'm sure there's a heavy use of salt over there that's contributing to the decline of a lot of our species of trees. And white pine, evergreens in particular, are very sensitive to overuse of salt. So there's a happy medium I feel we have to meet. And that's my opinion to try to coexist as best as we can and do the best we can safety-wise. But we can't make any guarantees that there won't be, just because we went in prune, that if we get a storm in July or August, or hurricane or anything, there won't be branches on streets in the woods.
All right. Can I get a motion to close the evidentiary portion of the public hearing?
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All right, so I think that was Jeff moved and Becky seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, Ms. Jakes,
Yes.
Mr. Round,
Yes.
Ms. Harrison,
Yes.
Mr. Bodmer Turner,
Yes.
Mr. Bowling votes yes. All right, we're going to do this as 4 different motions. Can I get a motion regarding approval or denial of the request to take out the 24-inch Norway maple at Masconomo Park?
So moved.
You're going to have to form it fully because I gave you the option for either approval or denial.
That's true. I make a motion to approve the removal for the 24-inch Norway maple at Masconomo Park.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Any discussion? Ms. Jakes,
Yes.
Mr. Round,
Yes.
Ms. Harrison,
Yes.
Mr. Bodmer Turner,
Yes.
Mr. Bowling votes yes. Can I get a motion regarding the 8-inch hybrid elm on Reed Park?
So moved. Move to remove the 8-inch hybrid elm at Reed Park.
Second. And thank you for making me feel better, Jeff.
I try and Becky.
Any discussion? All in favor, Ms. Jakes,
Yes.
Mr. Round,
Yes.
Ms. Harrison,
Yes.
Mr. Bodmer Turner,
Yes.
Mr. Bowling votes yes. Can I get a motion on the 30-inch eastern white pine on Jersey Lane?
Motion to deny the removal of the 30-inch eastern pine on Jersey Lane.
Second.
Any discussion?
Yeah, could we modify that and further review of trimming or pruning within the next, say, 6 months or so
Friendly amendment?
as an amendment?
Yes. Ms. Jakes, you're okay to take
I
that? as a-
agree to the friendly amendment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? Ms. Jakes,
Yes.
Mr. Round,
Yes.
Ms. Harrison,
Yes.
Mr. Bodmer Turner,
Yes.
Mr. Bowling votes yes. Can I get a motion on the 18-inch Norway maple at Lincoln Street Well?
I'll make a motion to deny removal of that Norway maple on Lincoln Street.
I'll second that with a friendly amendment that it be given a nice bit of pruning.
That is
Any
fine.
discussion? All in favor, Ms. Jakes,
Yes.
Mr. Round,
Yes.
Ms. Harrison,
Yes.
Mr. Bodmer Turner,
Yes.
Mr. Bowling votes yes. All right, that includes our foray into the forest for tonight. All right, moving on to agenda item number 2, COVID-19 updates. We had originally been anticipating having members of the Board of Health join us tonight. We are going to discuss how things went over the past week or so with respect to COVID testing and COVID in general in town, and discuss how we wanted to proceed with additional testing. I'm a little unhappy that members of the Board of Health are not here to help us in this. I was going to be relying on their input regarding this. In any case, Greg, what have you got for us?
Sure. So they do apologize, but their schedules didn't allow them to attend this evening. However, they gave me some information. But first, in terms of The testing, we did complete a round of some 730 tests for residents pre and post the Christmas holiday. And we did not see a tremendously large number of positive cases. So that's very good. That's encouraging. We are not seeing any rapid additional spread. We continue to have a higher number than we did, certainly. But we are seeing a bit of a trailing off. I think we may be moving back into the yellow, possibly green designation this week, assuming we don't have any surprises over the next couple of days. So there were a lot more requests. All the slots were quickly filled up, and the second plan worked much better. Pleased that Allen's Pharmacy was able to help us out, and all that with the pre-registration went quite smoothly. People were able to sign up for a particular time and get in and out without any troubles, nor did it cause traffic problems with the rest of the businesses in the area. So all that went very well. Not inexpensive, but we were able to use CARES money and possibly some FEMA reimbursement for the costs of that testing. At this time, the Board of Health doesn't feel there should be additional restrictions. We're all sort of waiting basically until the end of this week. The governor should be making some announcements at the end of the week. Not sure what he will be saying, but the feeling is that we should, at least from the Board of Health's perspective, they feel we should wait until the governor weighs in at the end of the week and into next week as well. The Board of Health will be meeting a week from Thursday, which would be a time where they would hope to further review any rise in cases because of the holidays, and also assess where the state is recommending things go in terms of any further restrictions or not. At this point, in terms of additional testing, obviously it's always helpful to have testing. The more testing, the better picture we have of what's happening in the community. The testing landscape is evolving sort of consistently or constantly. We expect to see various home test kits become available over the counter soon, new products that are being released. The state is expanding, continues to expand its testing, and will do so even more now that the new stimulus legislation has passed and has been signed into law. So we're waiting to see some of the results of that. So it may make sense to take a pause for now before doing additional town-sponsored testing, but we can certainly talk more about that possibility. In terms of contact tracing, again, the state has struggled to keep up with the demand, but I think is made some good strides in improving their people power and the number of staff that they have hired. They've gone on a pretty aggressive hiring campaign to get more contact tracers in place. And so their statewide program should be more helpful to us going forward. And in addition, our own public health nurse has recruited a third person to help, and we hope to get her trained and able to help in the next couple, 3 weeks. So obviously we continue to anxiously await for the vaccines to become more readily available. That won't be available for the general public for a few more months. We're looking at the April timeframe when the general populace will be eligible. We are moving forward with the help of Gloucester taking the lead on being able to provide vaccines to our police and fire personnel. That should be happening next week, assuming everything goes according to plan in Gloucester. and thanks to Gloucester's efforts to pull that together so that they could become a vaccination site for first responders. They've reached out to a number of the area communities in order to meet the minimum threshold for numbers to be able to host a site. On that note, it would be helpful if you would authorize us, the town of Manchester, to enter into a memorandum of understanding with Gloucester for that vaccination service. And that enables them to proceed with processing insurance payments and collections to help defray some of the cost of the vaccinations themselves. So if at the end of our, or at some point here, before we're finished with this topic, it would be helpful if you granted the authority to enter into that MOU and either authorize me to sign on your behalf, or we can have you sign it as soon as we receive that document. So that's the gist of the update. You know, as I think most people know, right after Christmas, the governor announced a further restriction. We're down to 25% capacity at most retailers and restaurants and gyms and that sort of businesses. And so we will see if there are further restrictions in the next week or two. The positivity rate has climbed pretty high in Massachusetts. We're around that 8% positivity statewide, which is high. The 5% is a typical threshold where additional restrictions tend to kick in. So we'll have to see how things evolve over the next couple of weeks. People are nervous about, again, another holiday bounce, if you will, because of the amount of additional socializing that was hard to resist for many people, given the holiday time. So I think that's most of what I needed to provide you for an update. Obviously, we can discuss any one of those topics further.
Members of the board.
I do have a couple of questions, Eli, if I may.
Mm-hmm.
For Greg, do you know if the town nurse still needs more help? And if so, where are they advertising or asking for it?
So at this point, I think she feels comfortable with having three people fully trained to do the contact tracing and the additional support from the state on their community contact tracing efforts. So unless things change for the worse significantly, I think we're okay for now.
Okay, and my other question was, could you just verify for me, you know, this, the agreement with Gloucester is for vaccinating first responders? And does this include, for example, is the town nurse considered in that? Are town hall employees considered in that? Because I would think those are all high risk.
All right, so this really is focused on the police and fire personnel.
Okay.
I'll have to double check it. It may be available for the public health nurses. I don't know that for a fact.
Okay, thank you.
Other board members? Any comments on the memorandum of understanding or any comments about testing and pausing and how, under what time frame we should follow up?
When is this vaccine due to be administered, Greg? Is that program happening this month, like in the next 2 weeks?
So for the public safety, it is scheduled for
Yes.
next week.
Public safety, next week.
Next
Okay.
week, yes.
Yep.
Eli, if I may,
Yeah, go ahead, Ian.
have we seen a copy of the memorandum of understanding?
I have not seen that yet, no.
Could we find some way to defer until we can see it before we sign it?
Yeah, the only reason why I'm hesitating is because of the quick turnaround time needed. So obviously, we should review it before we sign. If you want to hold an emergency meeting as soon as we get it, that would be one option. Or if you want to authorize, Eli.
Can we authorize contingent that we will approve it contingent on having seen it and agree with it?
Or at least having a representative perhaps from the board.
I mean, it's an easy thing to send it out. I mean, takes.
Right, for you to officially act on it, we need to have you hold a meeting. So if you want to see it and review it and vote on it, that's fine. We just would need to set up a special meeting to do that.
What's your concern, Ann?
What's that?
What's my concern?
Yes.
I don't like signing documents that I haven't seen.
I don't think we're being asked to sign the document. I think we're being asked to authorize Greg to enter into an MOU.
The MOU is, Greg, the MOU is going to commit us to simply providing the funds through insurance to pay for this, right?
It's basically committing us to help with all of the paperwork. That's the gist of the MOU. And that if there are inadequate paperwork from any person that got vaccinated, then we may have to absorb that cost because they weren't able to get the cost covered through the state and federal programs.
Do we have an idea of those costs?
I don't have that, no. So this is all pretty brand new and fluid, but I understand the hesitation. I just would encourage us to be flexible enough to hold a quick meeting if necessary to do that final approval. I wouldn't want to pass up this opportunity because we weren't able to meet.
I'm fine with doing it. When do you expect to get the MOU?
I would hope by the end of the week.
I'm comfortable with that.
Yeah.
I'm more concerned about getting our police officers and firefighters through the first round of vaccination and the follow-up vaccination. We just spent thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars on testing that we had no bar for, that anybody who was a resident could come in and get tested. And this is a much more critical public health issue to me, and I would support it. We're really talking about the lives of our first responders, and that makes me very concerned. So I would really support Greg's judgment in this in terms of paperwork. And if we run into a cost, then we can take that up when that cost comes. But I think we need to move as quickly as we can in this direction.
Great. Greg, is this a document that must be signed by us, or is it going to be signed by you on behalf of the town?
Well, you can authorize me to sign on your behalf.
All right. You sign a lot of other things on behalf of the town, for sure.
But not unseen.
No, but he's going to see it.
But not unseen by us as a general.
Well,
Well, there are any number of contracts that Greg executes on a regular basis. As a town administrator, we don't.
yeah.
But there are things that we've budgeted.
That's correct. That is true.
as this would have to be, Eli, a public meeting, does it also have to then comply with amount of time for notification? I'm just concerned that, and I
No.
understand.
So this I think would qualify as an emergency meeting because it entails something that needs to be acted on immediately or very quickly. We
Okay,
don't know when the information is going to come in.
thank you.
Look, I'm perfectly happy to pull together an emergency meeting to discuss that when it comes in. I don't think it's going to be very hard for us to pull together a quorum, and we can take a short bit of time to look over an MOU. A letter like that's going to be pretty short, right, Greg?
Yes, yes. No, I think I don't think this will be difficult. But I understand that, it's always good to look at a document before you say yes to something. So I understand the concern.
You all right with that, Jeff?
My only concern is that it would impede the town's participation in this program.
No, we won't let that happen.
And, frankly, I think it's important to do due diligence. And I'm, we did not budget for every single penny that was paid out in the COVID testing because it came under CARES. And I don't understand the reluctance to give this over to Greg and let him go ahead and execute the MOU. I'll support whatever has to happen. I'll be there for any emergency meeting that has to happen. But I'm just concerned about our public health, the public health of our first responders. They've been out on the line for a long time.
All right. Well, board members, just be aware that I will be probably hitting you up for a relatively short notice meeting later on this week, and we'll take it up then. So I think I'm going to move off of the COVID-19 updates at this point, unless other board members have any other comments to make.
Were we going to discuss the amount of information that's released to the extent that it can be done without breaching confidentiality?
Sure, I'd love to discuss that, except we don't have any of the members of the Board of Health here with us. So I think it's kind of not going to be a very productive conversation.
Mhm.
Eli, I know we need to keep moving along in this meeting as the trees took a long time. I think that we can give guidance to the Board of Health on this. I'm pretty annoyed that they didn't take the time to show up for this meeting. They couldn't get a quorum together for this meeting so that we could jointly discuss this. And it's not just out of annoyance that I'm saying that we should go ahead and talk about it, but I think we should lend them the position of the Board of Selectmen on this.
All right, let's discuss it. We've had, concerns from a few different fronts that we are, parsimonious with the information that we provide right now to residents regarding COVID activity in town. The guidance from the state, the minimum guidance from the state is to provide the number of cumulative cases and the number of active cases, and that is what we provide. But we do not provide any additional qualifying information of any nature with regard to that information. That has been frustrating some people. And I know that I have asked that the Board of Health find a way to provide some additional qualifying information. I've continued to maintain that I think it would serve our residents well to have additional qualifying information. I know it can be difficult to do that while maintaining confidentiality, but I'm confident there are ways to do something. I know that the public health nurses have had concerns that it will impair the ability to do contact tracing if people feel that they are not going to have complete confidentiality. But I don't think it impairs confidentiality for the Board of Health to convey some opinion about the nature of the overall COVID cases in town, whether or not they're external or whether or not they're beginning to be
Community-based.
clusters from within town, or a little bit more information about when the active cases represent across a 2-week span something that's going to constitute moving the town back and forth between yellow and red. Just a little bit of additional information beyond the bare minimum that will give residents a little bit less of a vacuum in which to operate. So I'm being fairly vague in what that is, but I would like the Board of Health to provide a little bit more guidance on this front.
If I may, Eli, one area that came up tonight is exactly how many positive cases did we find in our testing? Greg says kind of vaguely, not many. And is not many, none, 20? Or is that confidential?
But we're still waiting for a few results, so I don't have the grand total. But there were less than 2 handfuls through all the testing that I'm aware of.
So less than 20.
Less than 10.
Ah, sorry. Too many hands. Yes, less than 10.
You counting feet in.
Other board members have comments on the reporting of information?
Yeah, Eli, I'm a little curious. They should provide some information about their methodology. I think I can understand cumulative cases, but active cases, what's their definition of active? Do they have tracers that contact these patients that are active weekly and say, are you still sick? Is active quarantined at home? Is it hospitalization? All of the above? I'm mostly curious what active means and how somebody gets on that and when they get off. Because the course of disease can be a few days, it can be a few weeks. Like some clarity on that.
So John, are you asking for a clearer definition of that, or specific breakdowns for people who are hospitalized?
I'm more interested in the process at this point. How do they define active? If you're active today, do they just say you're active and in 2 weeks we're taking you off the active list, or do they call them back? Is somebody on that active list for a month or 2 months? Because in some instances, I guess people can be sick for a long time.
Yep.
Some sort
May
of
I add to that?
confirmation about that. Yeah.
Eli, if I might add as well, I think that, I don't know if people realize that we're not apprised of who the individuals are. We're not given a lot of details either. So it's not that we're withholding any information. But I would say that I agree with John. Clarification would be a lot, would, I think, go a long way to helping people along with this. For example, when a number jumps up, sometimes those cases are old cases that have just been found out about. So I think that type of further explanation or clarification might be helpful, but I completely agree with what John's driving at.
Not to split hairs, but I would support what John's talking about in terms of a clarification around what an active case is and how one moves from active to inactive, is taken off that list.
Yeah.
But I really am concerned about giving out a lot of detailed information that people will then make decisions about how they behave that are more lax. Oh, these are cases that are coming from out of town, so we don't have to worry. Or, these are old cases, so we don't have to worry. I think that specific information in that regard about particular cases is not helpful in terms of people keeping their guard up. And I know we're all exhausted. I talk a lot with my wife about it, that I'm really tired of this. I'm tired of having to think about all these things I have to do before I can go outside and go do something. But I do it, and I do it because I don't want to get sick and I don't want to make anyone else sick should I,
Right.
God forbid, get this virus and not be symptomatic. So I'm concerned about details leading to people becoming more lax in their behavior, but I very much support John's clarification about what an active case is and how long someone is considered active and what would be the criteria for being moved from active to inactive. That's general information that I think is very helpful. Then when people see the active numbers change, they can know.
Yeah, then you know who's moved in and who's not who, but how many people are new and how many people have moved off.
Right.
Well, you
Your active
don't know
case-
that because you don't know that
we
just
don't
for
know
the
that.
reason that you said, John, that some people may be active for a longer period of time because they're seriously ill.
Right, that's correct.
As opposed to someone who is exposed, tests positive, has no symptoms, and is quarantined for 2 weeks.
Yeah, but you can have 14 active cases last week and this week, and all 14 of those cases could have moved off the list and you got 14 new ones. That tells you something different than if it's just a steady state. These people were sick last week and it's the same people that are sick this week. We'd like to know, be curious. And it can drive some of our behavior. I agree with that, Jeff.
Other comments from the board?
On a slightly different topic, one of the things we were going to talk about is whether we should continue to do testing, and if so, how. Given the relatively small number of positive cases that we found, would it make sense to offer testing to the people who show up on the contact trace list, so that the town pay? Yes, most of those people probably have insurance, but rather than let them say, well, I don't feel like going to the doctor, or my insurance doesn't cover enough of this, just have the town pay for testing for everybody who shows up on a contact trace.
Seems like a reasonable thought, at least to forward that to the Board of Health.
Alan seems to have it got handled, and it's relatively small numbers.
Mhm.
Would we also be covering people who were not brought to the attention of our Board of Health? So that if, my understanding of what you just said, Ann, is if someone is diagnosed as positive, then through contact tracing, we say to other family members or other acquaintances who have had significant contact with them, that they would be tested for free by the town, whether or not they were town residents. It gets a little dicey, you know, I mean, what if someone is being notified by Beverly that they were in contact with someone who had COVID? Do we cover them? It becomes hard to determine, you know, if we
Yeah,
just do it,
let's,
if you just do it with people who are positive and contact tracing initiated by the town reveals that there are 6 or 7 other people that need to be tested. That's one thing, but
we'll do a singing beach on it and just say only town residents detected by town contact tracing.
I think we need the Board of Health here to chat about this.
yeah.
We really do.
Mhm. Okay.
Because we don't know, you know, I'm curious about how they do that and how that's going.
I'm also curious about what it would cost.
Yes, that leads to that.
Mhm.
Other comments? All right.
Can I ask that we have a representative of the Board of Health present, at least one representative of the Board of Health present at our next meeting?
Yep. Good to move on now.
Mhm.
All right, town email accounts policy discussion, agenda item number 3. So this is coming back to the topic of whether or not boards and committee members across the town should be given town email addresses. And we discussed this very briefly at our last meeting, and went off and produced a little bit of information for discussion at this meeting. And in your packet gave you a list of a number of potential issues with doing this for all the boards and committees. And we'll take a little bit of time to discuss it tonight and see how we may want to form a policy here. We don't necessarily have to, it's not necessarily the goal to finalize that policy tonight. I'm going to gauge a little bit on how much we have in the way of unanswered questions at the end of a brief discussion here tonight. So the first point was management. So we have on the various different committees 200 to 300 different volunteers, and committee members come and go. So our IT department will have to be able to enable or disable accounts. Someone will have to be responsible for ensuring that that happens. This is a non-zero cost, administrative cost to the town. Regarding open meeting law, we need to do this anyway, but there's some additional training to that's required to ensure that people are aware of open meeting law requirements using such town email accounts. This is particularly true for boards that have adjudicative roles. In general, email communications between board members really should be extremely rare. Most emails would and should be between town staff and committee members only. So there's a question about how much of an actual benefit for a lot of committee members this will yield, given the potential cost. Third is support. A lot of people, with that many people having email accounts, there's going to be a considerable amount of support, technical support required for people gaining access to, losing access to, or having just general technical issues dealing with their email. And then the last one is the cost. And it costs us about $8 a month per email address, or $96 a year. At 200 different committee and board members, we're looking at an additional cost of nearly $20,000 a year. So those are the basics in front of us tonight. Greg, do you want to add anything to this, or and if not, we'll just let board members debate.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good summary, Eli. Just to note that we have provided it for all elected town officials. So we're focusing on the various appointed boards and committees.
If I may, Eli,
Sure.
my concern about the communications between board members kind of cuts the other way. At the moment, we have absolutely no idea what people are doing in committees in their private email. If we had people using town emails, we would at least have a record. Not that they couldn't go to their private emails to do things that the open meeting law discourages, but this would at least be some check on that.
All right.
I strongly support what Ann just said. The open meeting law issues exist whether they have a town account or don't. And that we have some access to monitor, and at least we have access directly to the record of what kind of communications are going on. And if they should try and, if committee members for some reason should try and subvert that because they don't want to take the time to use their Manchester email, then I think that would be a reason to remove them as committee members.
Eli, may I ask a question? Oh, I'm sorry, Jeff, thought you were done.
It's a very important thing that we know what kind of communications are going on among boards, and that they be using a communication platform that that can be accessed and monitored by the town. I also wonder whether there's any economy of scale on point number 4, if we jump from 60 accounts to, or 100 accounts to 300 accounts. And whether that number goes down in terms of the actual number of cost per year or month for an email.
Greg, do you have any information on the economies of scale before I turn it over to Becky?
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't. I'll have to find out. That's a good question, Jeff. We can ask.
Becky? You're muted. You can see you talking.
Becky, your lips are moving, but we're not hearing you.
Still no?
That's good.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Yeah.
My question is that, and I don't know if this goes to Greg or John Whitten, but I thought that if you are an elected or appointed town official or committee member, that even your private email or cell phones even can be accessed if there are any concerns of violation of open meeting laws.
So you can request that a committee member turn over all emails, whether they're on their private email or a town provided email.
Right.
Format. So the short answer is yes, those are subject to gaining access.
So, and that the reason I'm asking for that clarification is just that that would kind of counter the argument to a certain extent of what's going on in terms of following emails. I do think that people who are elected officials, I think there is merit to having town emails. For example, for members of the planning board, board of selectmen, boards or committees along those lines, with significant reiteration of open meeting laws or re-education. But I don't think we should do it for everybody.
Eli, if I could respond to Becky's point about personal email is still subject to.
Sure.
It's a lot more costly to go through someone's personal email, and it exposes a lot more. You don't, when you ask for their email, they have to give you everything.
Mhm.
And then somebody's got to go through and find all the emails that are associated with members of the board or discussions with town residents, et cetera. That's a very costly thing to do. So, if we had a problem like that and we had to go through someone's personal email, we would run into a lot of difficulties. I would strongly think that using town email as their means of access and the community's means of access, because the community has less access to you if you have a personal email address.
May I respond to that, Eli?
Sure.
I agree to a certain extent, Jeff, but I mean, if somebody wants to somehow communicate under the radar, so to speak, they're going to do it. And I think that just having a town email will not be a deterrent. I think that for people, townspeople or members of community that want access to, for example, the chair of the planning board, or a member of the board of selectmen, they should be able to have access to that individual, especially if the individual knows that and clarifies that they're not representing the opinion of a board unless they are designated to do so. I just think it's prohibitively expensive. And I think who actually would, if someone's email is asked or requested, who pays for that?
Okay.
Well, so if there's a public records request and request all the email communications of board X, we would gather that information. We would try to gather all those emails from each committee member, and then we typically have town council go through and try to ferret out what's pertinent and what isn't.
Okay.
Eli, if I may.
Yes, Ann.
First, it was my understanding that all elected boards currently have town emails for all members.
Eli,
That's true, just recently, yes.
Okay.
This is Sarah Melish.
Sarah?
We have no town emails
Correct, you're not elected.
or finance committee chairs.
Yeah, you're not elected.
Right, but it has presented issues that people would wish to communicate with us, and it would be beneficial to have a town email for the chairs.
Eli, I've got a question. Actually, a question for Greg. Greg, have you spoken with other towns about how they deal with this? Or maybe
Not
they haven't.
recent. Yeah, no, a lot of, it varies a lot.
Okay,
All right, I mean, I shouldn't say it varies a lot. A lot of towns do it and a lot of towns don't.
okay.
So,
I'm just doing the math here. And yeah, I mean, it's a significant supporting activity. I mean, just the $100 a year per line, that's just the start of the issue. You know, people come and go and you're starting and stopping people and, you know, enabling and disabling accounts. And it's, I can see that it can be a challenge trying to keep up with all of this and troubleshooting some of it.
right, so it's, you know, some will say it's just, it's a cost of doing business. Is that,
Yeah.
that's what it takes to run
Yeah.
a town? And others say, well, why can't you use my personal account and you get access to it when you need it? So
Well,
there are both
I-
sides of it, and
I certainly agree at a minimum, Sarah's comment there with regard to chairs,
Mm-hmm.
because there
Mm.
needs to be some sort of avenue of communication from the public about, I got a question for the zoning board or the planning board, et cetera. And,
Mm.
you know, the chair, there should be something, and the chair can distribute information as appropriate to his or her committee. But
Oh,
it seems
Well,
to
either
me
that,
that makes,
or the town could establish policy that if you do have a question for one of the appointed boards, that you send it to a town staff member and they will disseminate it as appropriate.
yeah.
But I agree that will present some back end challenges.
if I may, there are a number of very small and very specific committees. I mean, right now, we're talking about the major committees, but I've forgotten the name of the welcoming committee, but maybe we could find some way of setting a floor for which committees need immediate public access and which can send their questions through town employees.
Okay. All right, how about if I go and do a little bit of legwork to see how some other towns are dealing with this, and come back with a little bit more information next time around. Because it sounds like there is some support for providing some more email support for the town email support for the committees, but we're not yet coalescing on a solution here.
I'd also like to understand, Eli, from the IT company, what the $100 a year covers. I mean, $100 a year to cover an email account is, even with people coming and going and some people having issues accessing or dealing with their email, $100 per account per year. That's a substantial amount of money. And, you know, we're talking about how substantial that amount of money is. I don't think we should be charged above that for anything.
if I remember correctly, I think that's because we moved to Microsoft 365 and that's their charge to us.
Yep. All right. Let's not kill too much more time on this tonight. We'll do a little bit more legwork and we'll come back on this item. Moving on to agenda item number 4, fiscal year 22 budget discussion. Greg.
I turn it back to all of you in terms of further questions or areas that you're concerned about and need information. The Finance Committee will begin their Wednesday meetings in earnest in a couple of days, as we are now into January, and things will quickly move along. It'll be the end of February before we know it. And at some point, we will need to make a decision as to when you think town meeting will actually occur, whether or not we're able to do it the normal first Monday in April. I'm skeptical as we sit here today that will be possible. But assuming that we want to get everything done on the normal timeframe, then the next 10 weeks are going to be quite busy with budget.
I personally have no additional questions since our last round, since nothing has really, happened since then. Other board members?
Eli, if I may.
Yep.
I don't have any further questions at this point either. I did ask for Greg help clear some things up for me, but they were not anything other than just points of clarification. So I'm all set for right now. And thank you again, Greg.
Absolutely.
John, Ann, and Jeff?
My major concern is at this point is what's going to happen in terms of moving towards dispatch. And that's something that Greg had put in that we were going to discuss in our meeting in 2 weeks. And
Yep.
so I'm prepared to wait for that, but I really want to get some clarification around how that might work and what the costs are and what our savings might be or might not be.
Okay. John or Ann?
I just had a question on safety and police salaries, but that may be kind of addressed, I guess, in subsequent conversations this evening, et cetera.
Well, in that case,
I have a question on a very small corner of the budget. At some point, I'd like to hear what sidewalk work is being proposed for next year.
do we have that information already, Greg?
But no, you do not. I'll have to check with Chuck. I don't know. Well, I'll check with Chuck first. Let me do that. And we can get back to you on that.
Thank you.
All right. Moving on to the consent agenda. So we have two items in the consent agenda. One's the Board of Selectmen meeting minutes from December 21st, and the second is accepting the resignation of Assistant Emergency Medical Director Tom Kehoe. We were anticipating this resignation for some time. Now that we have two full-time chiefs, the chiefs will take over the roles of the emergency management director and the assistant director, with Todd Fitzgerald being the director and Jason McCleary being the assistant director. And as far as the Board of Selectmen meeting minutes are concerned, I'm going to pull those out because I'm behind again. And I have some edits to them, which I want to get to you folks before we approve them. So the consent agenda tonight will only contain the accepting the resignation of Assistant Emergency Medical Director Tom Kehoe. And in accepting this, I would like to say, even though I'm not sure that he's here, thank you for the years and years of service. We will miss, continue to miss his very distinctive voice. Just in general, his presence at opening up the emergency support centers whenever we have a blizzard, and et cetera, et cetera. So years and years of service by Tom Kehoe. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I would second that, third it, whatever.
What's that?
I said I second or third or whatever that.
We're
Those-
offering a vote
All of
of thanks to Tom Kehoe.
Yep.
Yes.
All right, so can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda containing or accepting the resignation of Assistant EMD Tom Kehoe?
So moved.
Second,
Any discussion?
Could we,
Mr.
could we do a friendly amendment to that, that a letter goes to Tom expressing our thanks for all the time that he's put in on this?
Sure.
As amended.
All in favor, Mr. Round,
Yes.
Ms. Harrison,
yes,
Mr. Bob Turner,
Yes,
Ms. Jakes,
Oh, yes.
Mr. Bowling votes yes. Correspondence, we have a couple of letters on programming changes and municipal emergency reporting procedures and regional sports networks from Xfinity. This moment brought to you by Leaders in Internet Service. That was not an ad. Because we got a
not
little.
unless you identify who the leader is.
7, town administrators report.
Very briefly, we have town clerk interviews taking place this week and next. And if things go well, I would hope to have a recommendation to you at your meeting on the 19th. So aiming for that. I think I told you at your last meeting, the compost facility RFP is out on the street, and we're getting some response to that. So we will, those are due in a couple more weeks, and we will have a recommendation to you with some negotiation possibly to still do on the final contract. And then lastly, on the grant front, the major grant has been submitted. It's a two-step process. First, it goes to the state. It's a new program through FEMA called BRIC, and I'm forgetting what BRIC stands for as I sit here, but nonetheless, it's for infrastructure improvements. And so we have submitted for the Central Street Culvert project. That project has grown in scope and cost significantly as the challenges of putting in a new larger culvert and shoring up the old dam that is there. And we are seeking a large grant through the BRIC program. It's a 75% grant, 25% town funds. And the cost of that project is in the range of $6 million. So we would hope to get the lion's share of that through this BRIC grant. So that'll be competitive, but a lot of work has gone into the study of Sawmill Brook in its entirety. There's species, endangered species that can benefit flooding resiliency. So it hits many of the criteria that the BRIC program is targeted towards. And so we will keep our fingers crossed and see how that progresses. So that's all I need to go over for now.
Questions for board members on the town administrator's report? All right, there are no other matters as may not have been reasonably anticipated by the chair. Tonight we will be moving into an executive session. Pursuant to the requirements of General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A6, as the chair of the Manchester by the Sea Board of Selectmen, I've concluded that the engaging in the discussion regarding the substance of scheduled executive session and open session would be detrimental to the town's negotiating position. I've concluded upon the advice of counsel that their discussion may properly be held in an executive session. So I move that the Board of Selectmen will enter into an executive session pursuant to General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A6, to discuss the possible purchase of real property and without identifying the location and description of the property, as the same statement comprise the purpose for which this executive session was called for, and to adjourn the meeting of the Board of Selectmen at the end of the executive session without returning to an open session. Additionally, we will be discussing under Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A3, 3 to discuss strategy with respect to pending litigation regarding a personnel matter. We got a motion to move into executive session.
So moved.
Second,
Any discussion? Roll call vote, Mr. Round,
Yes.
Ms. Harrison,
Yes.
Mr. Bodmer Turner,
yes.
Ms. Jakes,
Yes.
Mr. Bowling votes yes. So the way we're going to do this from a purely technical standpoint is I'm going to enable the waiting room and boot out people who are not going to be in the meeting tonight. I'll give them a minute to gracefully exit. That's the end of the actual public section of this meeting tonight. Thank you all for attending. I will be stopping the recording at this time.